we're going to talk about breakfast.
First, we are gonna talk about breakfast.
This is actually a really good topic for me. This
This is actually a really good topic for me.
is one of my favorite topics
This is one of my favorite topics
because breakfast is probably my favorite meal of the day.
because breakfast is probably one of my favorite meal of the day.
Right? We usually have 3 meals: breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Right? We usually have 3 meals: breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Or maybe in your country there are more than 3 meals.
Or in your country, there are more than 3 meals. Or maybe in your country, there are more than 3 meals.
But in most cultures and most countries,
But in most cultures, in most countries,
we have some kind of breakfast,
we have some kind of breakfast,
right? It's the first meal of the day.
right? It's the first meal of the day.
So, first, I want to tell you a little bit about the American breakfast, the
So, I want to tell you a little bit about the American breakfast,
classic American breakfast.
the classic American breakfast.
People see a certain style
People see a certain style
of American breakfast when they
Amer- American breakfast. So people see a certain style of American breakfast
watch American movies and TV shows.
when they watch American TV, or when they watch American movies or TV shows.
And for the most part,
And for the most part,
this image of the American breakfast is pretty accurate.
this image of American breakfast is pretty accurate.
But what I would say
But what I could say,
Accurate.
accurate, 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 accurate. This image of American breakfast is pretty accurate, pretty accurate, accurate, pretty accurate.
is that we don't eat this type of breakfast every day.
What I could say is that we don't eat this type of breakfast every day.
So, on Monday,
What I could say is that we don't eat this type of breakfast every day.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
Went on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday,
on weekdays, most Americans don't have time to make a big breakfast, right? We have to get ready, we have to prepare ourselves for our day at work, and we don't have a bunch of time to cook breakfast in the morning. So many Americans tend to make a simple breakfast, or they might not even cook anything. They might just eat cereal and milk, right? When I was in elementary school, middle school, and sometimes when I was in high school, I would eat cereal for breakfast. I loved cereal, and it wasn't a bad breakfast. I actually enjoyed this. I'm sure many of the listening time listeners, probably enjoy cereal as well. It's good. There's a reason why it's so popular among people everywhere in the world. Some of my favorite breakfasts were, Honey Nut Cheerios, Apple Cinnamon Cheerios, Apple Jacks, a lot of different cereals. But many Americans eat cereal on the weekdays, but on the weekends, we like to eat a bigger breakfast. You've probably seen the American breakfast in TV shows or movies where the family sits down and eats eggs and bacon and pancakes and all kinds of things like that. We don't do that every weekend, for sure, but it's definitely something that we do often, right? Or we like to go out to restaurants to eat breakfast there. So maybe we don't want to cook pancakes at home, but we want someone else to cook pancakes for us. So we go out to some breakfast restaurant on Saturdays or Sundays. This is pretty common. I did this a lot when I was growing up with my family, or even as an adult. I still do this a lot. So breakfast in other countries besides America is very different, right? I haven't traveled to many countries, but in the countries where I have traveled to, I've noticed big differences in the type of breakfast that people eat. So in Europe, for example, breakfast is very small, right? I was really surprised when I first went to Europe, when I was in Spain and in Portugal. I realized that breakfast is not a big meal there, right? If you're from Europe, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For many Europeans, breakfast is simply a piece of bread with some butter or jam, toast, I should say, buttered toast or toast with jam, or some kind of sweet bread or something like that, plus orange juice or coffee, right? And that's it. Maybe in France, people might just eat a croissant and a cup of coffee or a small espresso, and that's it. For me, as an American, that's tough. That's not easy for me to eat and not eat anything else, right? I want a little bit more than that. But I know that some people don't want to eat that much for breakfast, right? I understand that. And I'm sure some of my listeners in other places around the world have even different styles of breakfast, not just like American or European, but something else that I just don't know. So I'd be interested to learn about breakfasts all over the world. And my typical breakfast is kind of like an American breakfast, a typical American breakfast. Nowadays, my wife usually cooks me eggs, bacon, and maybe even hash browns or toast or something like that. Hash browns are potatoes that we eat for breakfast. I don't really know how to describe them very well. They're kind of fried, or maybe they're not. I don't know, but they taste very good. You've probably seen them before. They're called hash browns. So I sometimes eat that. And usually we also eat some fruit for breakfast. So mango, papaya, apples, something like that. Or maybe yogurt, maybe a little bit of vegetables. There's different options, but I definitely love my bacon and eggs for breakfast. I love that combination, so that's one of my favorite breakfasts.
One of my favorite breakfasts.
And then in regards to coffee,
in regard to coffee, and then in regards to coffee, and then in regard to coffees.
Coffee is another big part of our breakfast.
Coffee is not coffee. I don't know. Coffee. Coffee is.
And then in regards to coffee, coffee is another big part of our
coffee is another big part
breakfast.
Of our breakfast, another big part of our breakfast.
Not me personally, but
not me personally.
Americans in general.
But American in general.
People tend to drink a pretty big cup of coffee.
People tend to drink a cup of people tend to drink a cup of a pretty cow. I don't know.
In regards to coffee is another big part of our breakfast. Not me personally, but Americans in general. People tend to drink a pretty big cup
of coffee, I guess.
Of coffee.
People tend to drink a pretty cup of coffee. A pretty cup of coffee
in the morning.
In the morning. In the morning. In the morning.
You've probably seen that before.
You've probably seen that before. You probably you you probably seen that before. You've probably seen that before.
They don't normally just drink small espresso shots.
They don't normally just drink small
People tend to drink a pretty big cup of coffee in the morning. You've probably seen that before. They don't normally just drink small espresso shots.
Small espresso shot. Espresso. I don't know. Espresso shots. Espresso shots.
People often drink a big mug of coffee.
People often drink a big mug. People often drink a big mug of coffee.
A mug is the type of cup where you put hot drinks in.
Oh.
Like tea, coffee, hot chocolate, etc. It's that cup that has the circular handle on it.
Then in regards to coffee is another big part of our breakfast. Not me personally, but American in general. People tend to drink a pretty big cup of coffee in the morning. So you've probably seen that before. They don't normally just drink small espresso shots. People often drink a big mug of coffee.
Is the type of
a mug is the type of
cup where you put hot drinks in, like tea,
put hot drink in like tea, hot drink in a tea,
coffee, hot chocolate,
tea, coffee, hot chocolate, tea, coffee, hot chocolate,
etc. It's that cup that has the circular handle on it.
Is that cup that has the circular. I think I heard that.
Circular.
Is the type of cup where you put hot drinks in, like
and
tea, coffee, hot chocolate, etc. It's that cup that has the circular handle on it.
That's a circular handle on it.
This is called a mug.
This is called a mug. This is called a mug. This is called a mug.
So Americans often drink a mug of coffee.
So American often drink a mug of coffee. So American often drink a mug of coffee.
I don't drink coffee in the morning.
I don't drink coffee in the morning. I don't drink coffee in the morning. I don't drink coffee in the morning. I don't drink coffee in the morning.
I like coffee, but it's not part of my morning routine.
I love coffee, but it's not a part of my morning routine. Morning routine. Morning routine. I don't drink coffee in the morning. I love coffee, but it's not part of my morning routine. But it's not part. It's not part of my routine, of my morning routine.
So for me, it's not that typical.
So for me, it's not that. It's not. So for me, it's not that typical. So for me, it's not that typical.
And lastly,
And lastly,
the time of breakfast.
and lastly, the time of breakfast. The time of breakfast.
People eat breakfast at different times.
People eat breakfast. People eat breakfast in different time. People eat breakfast in different times.
In different countries.
Different times in different country and different countries. So lastly, the time of breakfast. People eat breakfast in different times in different countries. Okay.
I know that in some countries breakfast.
I know that in some country breakfast. I know that in some country breakfast. I know that. In some country, I know that in some countries, breakfast. I know that in some countries breakfast
Might be earlier.
Might be earlier. Might be earlier. Might be earlier.
In some countries, breakfast might be later.
In some country, breakfast might be later. In some country, breakfast might. In some countries, breakfast might Might be later. Might be later.
I don't really know when the typical breakfast
I don't really know. I don't really know. I don't really know the typical breakfast.
begins for Americans.
Breakfast begin for American. Begin for American. I don't really know. I don't really know the types. I don't really know the typical breakfast. Breakfast begins for American.
But I think it depends on people's schedule.
But I think it depends. But I think is I think it depends. But I think it depends on. I think it depends on people's schedule. Schedule. People schedule. I don't know how to write schedule words. I don't know how to write schedule word. Okay. So I don't really know. I don't really know the typical. I don't really know. I don't really know the typical breakfast begins. I don't really know the typical breakfast begins begins for American, but I think it depends on people's schedule.
If people work early, then they eat breakfast early.
If people if people if people work early, they eat breakfast early. I don't know. I don't really know. I don't really know the typical breakfast begins for American, but I think it depends on people's schedule. If people work early, if people work early, they eat breakfast early.
If they start
If they
work
start
late,
work late,
then they
then
might
they
eat
might
breakfast later.
If they start late, if they start late, if they start late, if they start work late, they might I don't know.
Or Americans, but I think it depends on people's schedule. If people work early, then they eat breakfast early. If they start work late, then they might
start work late, then they might
eat breakfast later.
eat breakfast, then they eat breakfast later. They eat breakfast later. Okay, so but I think it depends on people's schedule. If people work early, then they eat breakfast early. If they start work late, they might eat breakfast later.
I think that's how it usually is.
I think that's how it usually is. I think that's how is. I think that. I think that. I think that's how it usually is. I think that's how usually is.
And I think that's how it is.
And I think that's how it is. And I think that how it is. Anything that how it is
In many places, probably.
in many places. And in many places, probably. Probably.
But yeah, breakfast is often said to be the most important meal of the day.
So breakfast is often please often say to be the most often said to be the most important meal of the day. So breakfast is often said breakfast is often said to be the most important meal of the day.
I don't know if this is true or not.
I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know. I don't know. Is it true or not? I don't know if this true. If this true or not. I don't know if this true. I don't know if this true or not.
And I've heard many people say
And I heard many people say. And I heard many people say. And I heard. And I heard many people say. And I heard many people say.
that we don't need breakfast.
People say we don't need. We don't need. We don't need breakfast. We don't need breakfast.
A lot of people like to fast.
A lot of people like to fast. A lot of people like to fast.
In the morning.
Like to fast in the morning.
And not eat until later.
And not eat until later. And not eat until later. And not eat until later.
All right. To fast means to not eat food.
To fast mean to fast mean to not eat food. Fast mean to not eat food.
And people who do that will probably tell you that breakfast is not very important.
And people do that and tell you breakfast is not important. People do that. People who do that. People do that, and people do that will probably tell you. Will probably tell you. Tell you breakfast is not. Tell you. Breakfast is not. Tell you. Breakfast is not important. It's not important.
So, I don't know. I don't have an opinion about that.
I don't have opinion. I don't have opinion. I don't have opinion. I don't have opinion. What? I don't have opinion about that. I don't have opinion about that. I don't have opinion about that.
But I like breakfast.
But I like breakfast. But I like breakfast. Okay, so and then in regards to coffee, coffee is another big part of our breakfast. Not me personally, but American in general, people tend to drink a pretty big cup of coffee in the morning. So you've probably seen that before. They don't normally just drink small espresso shots. People often drink a big mug of coffee. A mug is the type of cup where you put hot drink in you put hot drink in like tea, coffee and hot chocolates, etc. Is that cup that has a circular handle on it. This is called a mug. Americans often drink a mug of coffee. They don't drink coffee in the morning. I don't drink coffee in the morning. I love coffee, but it's not part it's not it's not part of my morning routine. So for me, it's not that typical. And lastly, the times of breakfast. People eat breakfast in different times. People in different times in different countries. I know that in some countries breakfast might be earlier. In some countries breakfast might be later. I don't really know the typical breakfast begins for American, but I think it depends on people's schedule. If people work early, then they eat breakfast early. If they start work late, they might eat breakfast later. I think that's how it usually is, and I think that's how it is in many places, probably. Breakfast is often said to be the most important meal of the day. I don't know how, I don't know if this true, I don't know if this true or not. And I heard many people say we don't need breakfast. A lot of people do fast in the morning and not eat until later. To fast means to not eat food. People do this, people do that will probably tell you breakfast is not important. I I don't have opinion about that, but I like breakfast. Okay, so drink breakfast, last sleep, different time country. Okay, okay. Open the schedule. People only breakfast late. Might breakfast. Okay. And then to in regard in regard to
circular,
secular secular
circular,
secular secular regard,
regard,
regard, regard. Part of preface personality in general,
general,
general, general,
general,
general, in general. In general. In general, to drink pretty cup of coffee in the morning. Probably seen that before. Normally, just hot drink. Circular handle on it. This is called a mug. Drink a cup of coffee. Routine breakfast different. Okay, breakfast early. Okay. After drink important. Okay. Okay, see you tomorrow.